now that we've discussed male fertility for 10 minutes, could Jeremy be Arnold's son?
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the toast, Rightos, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, like we always do. We have a lot of Patreon questions, so we're going to start off with them. Once again, if you want your questions answered at priority, you can go see that on the Patreon. But if you want your questions answered at all, there's still the available email. This is Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. You can copy and paste that from the description because it's paid to type out. Also, hey, we got lights, kind of. I still have an LED strip that we've had since we moved in. I've yet to put up because that's just a lot of work. But we have light bulbs, which I really like. I've been trying to figure out how to make it pop more in the background, because the problem I'm running into is my face lights illuminate the background too. So I don't know how to I don't know how to make that less, because look, if I don't have my face lights on, you can see how intense the backdrop is. That's how intense the purple is for the backdrop, and I really like that purple in the background. But then then I'm too dark, right? So then it's a matter of well, do we want to if I make it like a blue, maybe make it even more intense? Is that anything? But even then, okay, cool. That's a really cool blue. I turn my lights back on. And in real time, you can see the backdrop lighten. I don't know. Maybe I need the LED strip to really make it colorful back there. I'll figure it out. We have some lighting. We have some fun lighting now. But our first question comes from Jeremy. He, him. And this is less of a question, more of a theory. But there has been a recent debate on whether the prototype Springlocks we see in Secret of the Mimic, created by Murray, are the same ones used later, or if they were separate from Henry/William. I then realized something from FNAF 3 and 4 that could imply they're separate. In Secret of the Mimic, Arnold is able to easily get inside of prototype Springlocks, Glamrock Freddy mech suit style. Murray's suits are also slightly better at handling water and fall damage. Slightly. I'll get into it. Meanwhile, in FNAF 4, an employee needs Afton's help getting inside the suit, and the Fredbear head is completely separated. Additionally, Ralph mentions the Springlocks take a minute to get into. If you aren't careful, William, and still have water damage problems. Quote, when using an animatronic as a suit, please ensure the animatronic parts are tightly compressed and fastened by the Springlocks located around the inside of the suit. It may take a few moments to position your head and torso between these parts in a manner where you can move and speak. Try not to nudge or press against any of the Springlocks inside the suit. Do not touch the Springlocks at any time. Do not breathe on the Springlocks, as moisture may loosen them and cause them to break loose. In the case that Springlocks come loose while you are wearing the suit, please try to maneuver away from populated areas before bleeding out, as to not ruin the customer experience. This makes me feel like they are different suits. But what do you think? Happy theorizing. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I've talked before on the channel about not necessarily the Springlocks themselves, but where Edwin's inventions and Henry's inventions differ throughout the franchise, right? Because when Secret of the Mimic came out, a lot of people's initial reaction was, oh, so everything was made by Edwin Murray and Henry and William didn't do anything. Which on a first playthrough, I get getting confused there, but in retrospect, looking back, that's not what it seems to be saying. In fact, I like linking this up a lot with what we just talked about on the channel about William making the Funtime animatronics for the reason of trying to recreate the Mimic. Trying to poorly remake what Edwin had already created. And then his best attempt was the Funtime animatronics. If that is true, which I think there's merit to argue, then it's fun to think about what else there is, right? The idea of if... I'm getting so distracted by how blue I am. I'm so blue. Because if I turn it to make the background more blue, it shines directly on my face. If I turn it off my face, and the background kind of dims a little. I gotta figure out this lighting situation. Anyway. This lines up with that logic pretty good. Like, in a pretty well and fun way. Where, you know, we have really well-made Springlock suits by Edwin Murray, and then, like, those shitty versions that William and Henry made. You know, the idea of, like, in Secret of the Mimic, Arnold puts on a Springlock suit and falls 2 feet through debris and rubble, and the Springlocks still don't kill him. This is maybe arguably he's safer in the suit than out of the suit. This is like the safest suit that has ever been created. Meanwhile, everything we know about Springlock suits is, if you look at it wrong, you die the worst death imaginable. So, like, when lining these things up, you're right to point out that it doesn't make sense for this to be the same damn suit. So if these are 2 different suits, the idea that William or Henry was trying to recreate something Edwin Murray had invented and did a worse job of it does kind of line up. It lines up especially well with the whole Fun Times Were a recreation of the Mimic. Because, like, all in all, it's this repeated idea of William and Henry obtaining what Edwin had and trying to make it on their own. You know, maybe if Edwin wasn't killed by the Mimic or whatever happened to him, then we would have seen Edwin's Springlock suits in Freddy's locations. We would have seen more Mimic endoskeletons. But because Edwin was killed, all of his knowledge went with him. And now, like, they have working variants of these things, but they have to make their own in order to make more. And that's where the lesser quality versions of these robotics come from. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And it also, like, to your point, it assuages the fear that a lot of fans had where, oh, so nothing was made by William and Henry. It's like, no, the shitty ones we know of were made by William and Henry. They stole the idea from Edwin, who was actually pretty damn good at making them. And I think that does track. I think that tracks really well with a lot of what we know. So yeah, thank you for your question, Jeremy. And the background changed anyway because we're standing up, because it's hard to keep my eyes open, because I just want to take a nap, dude. Anyway, our next question comes from Marks, they, them. For Poppy Playtime, I'm curious if you have any good ideas as to what the fuck is the deal for the standees. It's been something that's been bugging me lately. Originally, I assumed the prototype had been behind the messages to mess with us. But our confrontation with him makes it seem less likely, as he seemed largely disconnected from us actually being here, simply viewing us as an outsider. I did recently have a thought if maybe it's something similar to the idea of Remnant, where events happened to those kids were so traumatic it began infecting everything and leaving those imprints. But who knows? Is that even, like, actually happening in the game? Is it purely a thing we as the player experience? It's a good question, Marks. I think there's 2 ways to look at it. So the thing we have to consider is, so far in Poppy Playtime, we have 0 evidence of spiritual anything. Like, so far in Poppy Playtime, everything has been scientific horror. There has not been any paranormal horror in Poppy Playtime as far as I'm aware. There's been no mentions of ghosts or spirits or possession or hauntings or anything like that. It is biochemically changing and altering the body of children into a toy, which, again, crazy. But it's more science fiction than paranormal in that sense. So I hesitate to say the standees are haunted, right? Because, like, when you experience those standees, the most logical explanation is, oh, this is possessed, this is haunted. It was like a cute little standee, and now it's being modified by some evil spiritual force. But because there's so little spiritual anything in the rest of Poppy Playtime, my brain goes, well, it's probably not because the standees are possessed, which unfortunately leaves us 2 options, and I don't like either. Either the standees are also playtime experiments and were once also children, or it's non-diegetic, otherwise meaning, like you said at the end there, it's something the player is experiencing, but in universe, it's just a standee. I don't love either of those, realistically speaking. And if it was just the standees threatening us, I think you could make the argument that they were being recorded by the Smiling Friends to fuck with any intruders. Like, you know, if it was all just like, what was it? Bubba, no, not Bubba Fence, the pig one. Picky Piggy, I think it was. If it was just like stuff like hers, where it ends with her pretty much directly saying like, I'm going to eat you alive, then I could see the argument that maybe the Smiling Critters, I said Smiling Friends again, god damn it, maybe the Smiling Critters recorded these as a way to deter intruders, right? You're entering this toy lair, and on the way through you see like 5 standees. They're all like, haha, I'm Bubba Fin, and if you walk through these doors, I'm gonna kill you with a hammer. Like, if it was stuff like that, then I could totally see it's like, okay, they're recording them. But the fact that almost all of them seem not only in distress, but like they start normally and then cut to them screaming in pain. IMO, either that standee is also a child, which is crazy, or it's non-diegetic. It's just like a spooky thing for the player to experience, and it's not actually happening in universe. Because I just don't see any other good explanation for those guys. It's either kids were being turned into standees because fucking why not, or it's not happening in the game. And I don't like either of those. Like, I don't want to say like, I think it's maybe the first option. I hope it's neither option. These options suck. There's just really no, like you said, what the fuck is the deal with the standees? Like, there's just not a good explanation for them, frankly. But thank you for your question and letting me vent some of my frustration with it. Our next question comes from Sal, Something that's been on my mind lately is the relationship between Arnold, Cassie, and potentially Jeremy. I had some hope for when the Secret of the Mimic VR trailers were coming out, that the game would imply Arnold was in some kind of VR-influenced loop, leading him into being the Help Wanted 2 protagonist. But with how the VR port was handled and the lack of any new content, I wonder what all that VR imagery really meant outside of it just being the VR port, if it means anything at all. The possibility that Edwin invented VR is really interesting to me, and would fit nicely into Help Wanted 2. I always wanted Jeremy to be the Help Wanted 2 protagonist, but as time goes on, I feel the implication that Arnold is actually Cassie's dad gets stronger. The line, "When are you?" always struck me as odd. To me, it implies the protagonist has been inside of the VR network for a very long time. The only problem with Arnold being Cassie's dad is the timeline. It's possible Jeremy is still Cassie's dad without him being the Help Wanted 2 protagonist, but I think it would be very unsatisfying if that was the case. I want Cassie's dad to have a purpose, but Arnold fits better for the Help Wanted 2 protagonist. This isn't the first time that we've discussed the idea of like Arnold being related to Cassie in some way, and I agree that Arnold being Cassie's dad because of the timeline truly doesn't make sense. You know, we can assume he's like he has, first of all, it's it's a cut line, so we shouldn't use it to disprove anything. But there is a cut line when talking about the hours that they're forcing him to take. I'm pretty sure there was a cut line where Arnold's like, I haven't seen my wife for like 4 days or something. Hold on. Interesting, actually. I looked it up. Interesting twist in this. One of the unused lines, and again, it's unused, so like take it with a grain of salt. One of the unused lines is, what family? My parents are dead. My wife left me last year. I haven't seen my kid for, and it cuts off. I assume that this is part of the conversation in the beginning of the game, because it's sandwiched between a bunch of other lines that fit in there. It's like, next shift, I just finished 14 hours, 2 hours ago. Hey man, come on, I haven't been home in days. Murray's is another 2-hour drive. I got to pull over and take a nap or get some coffee. We have this whole thing with him where it's like, they're working him to the brink of exhaustion, and far past it. But this line is interesting with this theory. And again, it's unused. It is not in the game. So it should not be the be-all end-all of any theory. But my parents are dead. My wife left me last year. Oh God, I haven't seen my kid for ... Kid. So he has a kid in 1979. One child. And frankly, that can't be Cassie. Cassie's like, 8 in Security Breach? and this is 50 years ago, roughly. So it simply cannot be Cassie. But if Jeremy is Arnold's son, it could be Jeremy. And Jeremy could be Cassie's dad. This is technically possible. Now, I think it is truly unlikely for Arnold to be related to anybody. As much as it could be narratively satisfying, there gets to a point where it's like not everybody is going to be related in the same family. That's wild. But it is possible that they are, and if they are, this would be the lineage. Now, I do hear some of you that so Jeremy had a kid at 50. It's like, it's possible. If 1979, he has a kid, but we're not sure how old the child is. We can be very generous here and assume maybe Arnold, or maybe in this logic, Jeremy was born in 1970, right? And he's 9 years old. Because if it's Jeremy, FNAF 2 Jeremy, which may or may not be, he would have to be a young adult by 1987, which is in 8 years of this game, which, he'd be 17 by then, which I think is old enough to work at a fast food place in the 80s, But regardless, the idea that if we're just to do some timelines, he at least has a child by 1979. Now he says, I haven't seen my kid in I don't know how long, and his wife left him last year. So I mean, theoretically, the kid's at least 1 year old. As far as we're aware, just to get a range of ages here, the kid is at least 1 year old by 1979. So we'll say for now, 1978 is a birthday. Security breach is argued constantly as when it takes place. A lot of the time the calendar is used, and you kind of line up what days of the week you have to see what years you can find. I think the general consensus is sometime in the 2030s. So if we're being as generous as possible, if he's born in 1978 and security breach takes place in 2030, then we are looking at a 52-year-old Jeremy by the time of Help Wanted 2, which would mean if Cassie's 8, which again, we don't really know Cassie's age, but she's around Gregory's age, and they both seem 8 to 10-year-olds, if I had to guess. Is it said in the book? Does Escape the Pizzaplex ever specify Cassie's age? Let me go to the FNAF wiki. Cassie, age unknown child. Yeah, that's not very helpful. I assume not then. But, they give 8 to 10-year-old vibes. So, again, being super charitable, we'll say 8. And that would mean Arnold would have had to have a child at 42, which is, honestly, pretty common. I think that's completely reasonable. Now, for her to be, that's the most generous time frame. It's possible Arnold was talking about his son, who's 10 years old, and in that case, and if security reaches 2038 or something, or 2039, the latest that it likely is, then we're talking about 30 closer to having a kid 53, which even then it's less likely, but I'm pretty sure a man can, hold on, male fertility age chart, there you go. Fertility rate by age. Age's impact on male fertility. What age does male fertility decrease? Advanced paternal age is generally considered above 40 or 45 by most doctors. A man's chances of conceiving a child fell by 11% every year. But they were already undergoing fertility treatment. Interesting. So we're getting really into the granular nature of this, which I hesitate to. Whenever we get this far into a theory, I always have that moment of was Scott thinking about any of this? I made a meme, if I remember. Amanda, remind me to put this in. I made a meme that for Twitter the other day. It's just the Scott who had not thought of any of that, right? It's a Photoshop of a classic One Piece meme, but I have that moment in a lot of these theories where, we get 7 layers deep, and I sit there, I'm like, did Scott think about any of this? Or was it like, here's my story, here's some evidence for it, and he didn't think about what connections he had accidentally made? You know, like, is Scott in the writer's room being like, okay, I need to make sure Secret of the Mimic takes place in 1979, because if it takes place any earlier, Arnold would not be fertile by the time of 2025, when he would have to, or Jeremy, Arnold's son, would not be fertile enough to have Cassie by the time of 2025. So in that case, you know, like, it gets to a point, you know? Or like, is Scott thinking about this? I don't know. But here's the thing. It's really fun when you can to take real life logic into a theory just to help it seem more logical, right? Like, I'm not out here saying to make me believe in your FNAF theory, you need to bring in real biochemistry. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that biochemistry has anything to do with a FNAF theory. But if you have a theory on a video game and you can take something from the real world and add on to it, it just feels good, man. All this to say, men's technically never stop making sperm. So, theoretically, there's not really a hard cutoff from what I'm reading here. The quality and frequency does decrease starting around 40 to 45. So the older he gets after that, the less likely it's going to be. And all of that was from pathfertility.com. So, I mean, who knows how accurate? I don't know. It's written by someone with a PhD. So that does give me some confidence here. Hold, let me see. This was written by Kristen Bogard, PhD, founder of Biosciences, molecular biologist, study director. Are you like a fertility scientist? Molecular biology. Okay. But like, what are your credentials? Hey, in the modern age of, you know, AI slop filling the internet at all times, check your sources. You always want to see if you can find an author. You always want to see if you can find where they got their information from. Here we go. From .gov, from PubMed Central. Review of the literature, abstract. Increasing male age is associated with a significant decline in fertility, 5 times longer to achieve pregnancy over 45. Male biological clock. So yeah, it seems like 45 is like the time where you start rapidly like losing fertility. So, if we're talking, you know, we'll split the difference. Say 2035 is when security breach happens. -8 for Cassie's age. We'll do 9 right in the middle of 8 and 10. So -9 for Cassie's age. 2026 -45 for shit. I missed my calculator button. I instead of locked my computer. We'll do 2030. I'm doing a lot of quick math, so I'm just going to use a calculator to be safe about this. 2035 -9 -45. 1981 is when he should have been born for that. Which is 2 years after Arnold mentions having him. But if we're generous, and we say 2026, you know, -50, 1976. That's 3 years before. This lines up. You know, his wife left him a year ago. Still leaves 2 years for the kid to happen. Hasn't seen his kid in God knows how long. Longer than a year, likely. And then, you know, that just means that it's not impossible for Arnold to have a kid at 50. It's less likely. In contrast to, I'm reading the second thing I've pulled up now is from who wrote this? This is written by 3 different people. It's from a .gov National Library of Medicine. It's just a medical journal entry reviewing the literature on fertility. Yeah, but it says, in contrast to reproductive female reproductive functions, male functions do not cease abruptly. And androgen production and spermatogenesis continue throughout life. However, determining the decline in quality is somewhat difficult. For instance, when some population, oh, that's a good point. I love reading. Hey, I like reading scientific journals every now and then because you get perspectives you wouldn't think about. So they bring up that it's always difficult to get good data on fertility because of the implicit bias in the sample size. Because the people who are going to get examined for fertility already in their minds think there is a problem, which means there probably is a problem. So that's actually a really good point I would have never considered, that, you know, it's hard to get good data on this because most of the data we have is from people concerned about it. You know, you would want like a vast majority of people to provide a sample so that you could actually see a typical sample size. Regardless, most of the published studies are among older men. Few are more than 50 years old. Findings, here we go. Yeah, again, 40 and 45 is like the begin of the cutoff people are talking about. Astrology, 50-year-old men. So it seems like it is definitely possible. It is possible for somebody over 50 years old to have a child. It's just less likely is all. So we don't need to rule this out. But again, the older Jeremy gets, the less likely all of this works. All of this to say, now that we've discussed male fertility for 10 minutes, could Jeremy be Arnold's son? It's possible. It's possible. But more to your question, Sal. Because your question, I'm like 2 steps away even, because your question was bringing up that Arnold fits better for a Help Wanted 2 protagonist. I still think Arnold's dead. But, well, not necessarily. I definitely think that Edwin's dead. Arnold definitely survives in one of the endings, definitely dies in the first, and then he's kind of a Schrodinger's character in the second ending, where like he's in a burning van upside down, but the mimic's walking away. So as long as they went to collect their property, they could have found him, and if they went to collect their property fast enough, maybe he's still alive. But the VR is really interesting, right? Because not only is there like there's no new content, but you're right to point out that a lot of the trailers are very interesting, because the trailers of the VR port seem to imply that Edwin was inventing virtual reality at the same time, because it's like an older version of this headset that's diegetically in the environment of Murray's Costume Manor. And if Edwin did invent VR and Arnold went in there, we don't see, I hesitate to say that he's been stuck inside the VR network. Only because I would think he would have to die while wearing it, or something like that. Because you're right, the when are you is a weird question, but that also does make sense with Help Wanted 2, because Help Wanted 2's mini games are all over the place in the timeline. Some are in Fall Fest, some are in Sister Location, and some are the Pizzaplex. Now, if that's all Arnold's memories, then sure, but it is like it just simply wearing the headset at all, the question when are you makes a lot of sense. Even when you think about the fact that the VR mask presents a working and functional FNAF 6 pizzeria, when you take it off, it's ruined, it's in rubble. So like even then, like when are you? So for me, I still think Jeremy as Cassie's dad, being the Help Wanted 2 protagonist, makes the most sense. Jeremy being Arnold's son is a fun possibility that is possible, but I would say is arguably unlikely. But thank you for your question. The next one comes from Zoe, she, her. I've got a Poppy Playtime question for the Chapter 5 ARG. Admittedly, I have this question because I have seen some of this, but I will say just generally, I don't know a lot about like the Iceberg ARG stuff for Poppy Playtime. I haven't super kept up with it, but I've seen this video. In the Catnap reconditioning video, it looks like it took place before or shortly after he escaped and killed people. The employee handbook mentions this event. If that's the case, why did Leith Pierre call Catnap Theo in a VHS tape in Chapter 3? That VHS takes place 4 years later. So Catnap was already conditioned/tortured to forget his real name. Why would Leith address Catnap by his real name if Playtime wanted the experiments to forget them? That's a good question. Now, when I first read this, I was like, one of my reactions was generally like, maybe Mob fucked up there. It is possible, especially because I'm not going to say this is the only explanation. We'll go into that. But do consider that this VHS tape was in Chapter 3, and the most recent ARG was Chapter 5, which this was all happening while Mob Entertainment was changing CEOs and hands and everyone, and the teams were shifting around. So a small detail like that definitely could have been missed. So I just want to put on the table, it's possible it's a mistake. But let's play in the space that it's not. So, like you mentioned, Catnap was being reconditioned, and the whole point of the reconditioning is they want them to forget their real names. But 4 years later, Leith Pierre is calling Catnap Theo in a VHS tape. Why? My thinking, my go-to explanation for this is Catnap is special. As is Huggy Wuggy, as is Mommy Longlegs, as is, Doughy, as is, I guess, Lily Lovebraids to an extent as well, where, like, we have these major antagonists, the bigger bodies that we've been dealing with. And part of me wonders if that part of the reason why these toys are so distinct and important as their major antagonists for an entire chapter is because the conditioning did not work on them. We only see snippets. And in those snippets, we see Catnap, beginning to forget his name because of the conditioning. 4 years is a long time for that to wear off, or for Catnap to really try to remember his name is Theo, especially if the prototype is there. Right? The prototype seems like he was traveling between rooms and conversing with the toys to get ready for the hour of joy. And the prototype gave itself up to save Theo's life, and knows that Theo is so incredibly loyal to it that, like, he would do as much as he could to help the prototype. That's a very useful ally to have. And it's not a very useful ally if it is a brainwashed, conditioned Catnap. Not as useful. So I would not doubt if within those 4 years, the prototype was talking to Theo enough to counteract the conditioning and brainwashing that Catnap was being put through. Every now and then sneaking into his room, being like, "You're not Catnap, you're Theo. Remember that, Theo." One, maybe to help him feel better, but honestly, arguably, maybe specifically so Theo would work for the prototype. I mean, we hear from the prototype himself as Ollie admitting that Catnap worships the prototype as a god. So, like, he knows how much Theo worships him. And the moment he's not useful anymore, like we see at the end of Chapter 3, he kills him. So, like, the prototype doesn't super care about Catnap, does he? So we see Catnap reaching out to the descending hand of the prototype, ready to be saved and enter salvation. And the prototype kills him and takes him, and then wears him like a fucking fur coat the next time we see him, which is crazy. So the idea that the prototype was, once Theo was turned into Catnap, still continuing to manipulate him to help him makes a lot of sense. So, I still think it's possible that this was just straight up a mistake, but if not, then the idea that over the course of those 4 years, the prototype was working on undoing the conditioning that Catnap was being put through, I think is incredibly likely. And then by that time, once it starts not working, Leith calling Catnap Theo makes a lot of sense. He's trying to, like, all right, Catnap, let's do this thing. I'm going to kill you. Damn it. You're not Theo anymore. You're Catnap, like, he's frustrated that all this conditioning seems to have undone. So I think that does line up in a way. But thank you for your question. The next one comes from Billy, he, him. Of those who appear to have studied it in their respective timelines, who do you believe best understands the workings of Agony and or Remnant? Edwin, Henry, William, Dr. Talbot, or Phineas Taggart? We have evidence they all have biased views that taint their conclusions based on the observational data from the relevant stories. Who gets it the most right? This is a fun question. This is a fun like little this is a fun experiment here. Straight up, I don't actually think Edwin knows about Remnant. I don't see any evidence, unless I'm forgetting something. He never directly mentions it. And I've made the argument in the past that the glowing, like, molten goop that's powering the entire facility could be Remnant. Because here's the thing, right? Like, it has the look of Remnant. It has the powering nature of Remnant. It's being funneled into the main house where he's trying to recreate somebody who's died, which would be a Remnant thing. But the problem with it is there's so goddamn much of it. I don't know where the hell they'd get all those dead bodies. So, like, I hesitate to say Edwin even knows what Remnant is. As far as Henry goes, the only Remnant he would have known about is from William's documents. So I think on a technicality, Henry only gets it as right as William could. So when it really comes down to it, it's William, Dr. Talbot, and Phineas Taggart who gets their ideas of agony or Remnant correct. Now, out the gate, William, I think if William had 10 more years, he probably would have got there. But I don't think William ever fully understood what he was working with. At least not in the games. In the books, I think he had a better grasp on Remnant, but in the games, he seems to only understand that, you know, if you heat Remnant, you can pacify it to transfer it, and you can inject it into a robot to make it move. And, you know, even then, in the books, he seems to have a similar concept. He's still in the experimentation phase, you know? We see him inject it directly into the heart of one of the kids from the Silver Eyes, I can't remember his name, thinking it would, you know, either he'll see what happens or it'll kill him, win-win. And he saw what happened, but he's kind of dead before it mattered. So, like, if he did that, and that's the funny thing is, him injecting that Remnant was the only reason they were able to turn the animatronics back on William. Probably would have lost otherwise. So clearly he doesn't know fully what he's working with. So I don't think it's William or Henry in that matter. And it's funny that we end up at the end with Dr. Talbot and Phineas Taggart. Now I'm going to just double check names, because I'll never forgive Scott for giving us two different scientists in the Stitch Wraith Stingers. One of them focused on agony, one of them focused on Remnant, and their names are Taggart and Talbot. My ass confuses them all the time. So yeah, Taggart is the agony guy and Talbot is the Remnant guy. Now, another problem with judging how well they understand what it is, they don't really tell us their full understanding. Well, especially Dr. Talbot. Phineas Taggart, the guy who's studying agony in the books, we do get a good couple chapters with him going through his thought process and like everything he knows about agony. And the thing is, yes, his views of agony are biased. It's hard to say that either Taggart or Talbot are incorrect in their understandings of agony or Remnant, because they are simultaneously the main source of information we have for agony and Remnant. You know, like, we really, all we understand directly about agony and Remnant comes from these two guys. So anything they say, you know, it's probably right, because that's all we can tell. That's all we could know. So that's on the face of it. And not only that, but there's a bit of an unfair advantage here, because Phineas Taggart, like I said, he's got a couple pages worth to explain agony to us, the reader, go over his experimentation about it, what he thinks about it. And then we see a successful experiment where he successfully creates the Stitch Wraith, this being of agony. Dr. Talbot, we don't get as much time with. He gets like a paragraph tops to explain to Detective Larson what Remnant is. And we know he successfully made the Remnant pendant. That's it, though. Like, we don't get as much time with him, so we don't learn as much of what he thinks about Remnant as we probably wanted to. So I would say, as far as we're aware, Talbot and Taggart are the most right in their respective fields. That Taggart is the most right about agony, and Talbot is the most right about Remnant. We have no evidence to prove or disprove that. It's kind of just a vibes thing. I think William probably would have gotten there with like 10 more years of study, but he did die, so he can't do that now. Maybe he'll do that later, but he can't do that now. But thank you for your question. Probably our last question today comes from Madison, she, her. Not a theory-related question, but out of every restaurant we see in the franchise, which one would you want to visit if you were a kid? Just for added context, let's pretend you wouldn't be harmed during your visit. Maybe missing a few, but the list I made is FNAF 1, 2, and 3. It's not a restaurant, but close enough. Pizza Sin. Again, we'll pretend it's real. Mega Pizzaplex or Into the Pit Freddy's. My choice would obviously be the Pizzaplex, but the second would be Into the Pit Freddy's. A few bonus could be Fredbear's, Fall Fest, or Circus Baby's Pizza World. There's your question. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's so good that it needs to be out of the conversation. The Pizzaplex is by far one of the coolest places to ever go ever. So it's got to be out of the conversation. Like the Pizzaplex wins hands down 10 times over. It is a mall-sized attraction that has not only several restaurants. You don't want pizza? Go to El Chips. Like several restaurants. But Fazbear Blast, Monty Gator Golf, let's not even use the brand names here. Mini golf, laser tag, go-karting, at the best of times, a log flume. In the books, I'm pretty sure there's like a small roller coaster at some point. Several arcades. There's so much to do at the Mega Pizzaplex. It is an insane feat. Not to mention life-size animatronic robots that are incredibly well-maintained and perform really good shows. Like, in a world where the Mimic isn't trying to kill everybody, the Pizzaplex is the best place to ever be ever. So, like, that has to be out of the conversation. So we're just talking about 1, 2, 3, Pizza Sim, Into the Pit Freddy's. Fredbear's, and I'll put Fredbear's, Fall Fest, and Circus Baby's Pizza World, because that'll change my answer. Because I think I lean to Into the Pit Freddy's as well, because it's got a really good arcade, and we see it very thoroughly. Whereas like 1 and 2, there's arcade machines around, but we never get a good look at them. So I think I do, I would also lean into the Pit Freddy's, but if we had Fredbear's, Fall Fest, and Pizza World, I immediately switch over to Fall Fest. I am a sucker for, like the Ren Fair or autumn festivals that like we have around here. Any like gathering in an outdoor location in a cooler like fall time where there's like games and food and music performers, that's my shit. I go there every chance I get. We've gone to the Ren Fair for my birthday every year for like fucking 5+ years, and I don't want to change. We only ever don't go if we're incredibly busy. Like, the goal is, I love the Ren Fair. I want to go for my birthday. It's just a fun time, and it doesn't have to be on my birthday, regardless. For me, Fall Fest wins hands down. If the Mega Pizzaplex isn't real or out of the conversation, because I am also a sucker for mini golf, laser tag, go-karting. I love those activities. So that would be my take. I think so. I would happily sacrifice the pizza to be able to go in the corn maze at the Fall Fest. But thank you for your question, Madison. I think that will get us today. Again, if you want your questions answered on priority, go over to the Patreon and do that. Or if you just want to send in a question, you have the email, Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast @gmail.com, which you can copy and paste because that's difficult to type. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.